Ladies and gentlemen, boils and ghouls, creatures of the night, this is the Face for Horror podcast. My name is Chris, but you can call me Moon. And tonight we're going to talk about 1984's classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, my relationship with this movie, I saw this movie pretty much about the time it came out. I didn't see it in the theater. I was too young for that, but I did see it when it hit cable. Pretty shortly there afterwards. And I gotta say, it creeped me out at the time. I've got some issues with it nowadays. There's certain things of it that I'm not super crazy about. Of the 4 initial entries into the Big 4 franchises, this one kind of swaps places depending on my mood and depending on what's going on. Between either 3 or 4. It's always behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's always behind the first Friday the 13th, which, if you watch that show or listen to that show, you'll know that that's a lot of nostalgia for me on that one. That one is kind of a big deal for me. That's my favorite franchise. And this one swaps places between 3 and 4, between this one and Halloween. There are times where I like Halloween better, and then there are times that I like this one better. 100% I like Freddy better than I like Michael. The villain in this one is awesome. Interesting little thing, until the internet came around and Facebook horror groups and talking with people like that, I always assumed, because everybody that I knew growing up who saw it always assumed that Freddy was more than just a child killer. Come to find out, a lot of people just take what's said in the movie at face value and don't read into the subtext. Everybody involved with the movie said that was the original intent, but there was some things that happened right around that time that they took that element back out from the script directly and put it back in as subtext. It was always intended to be there. But you were supposed to read that on your own. And it's funny how people don't. I always did. Everybody that I knew always did. This movie was directed by Wes Craven. It's one of his best movies for me. I'm not a huge Craven fan. I love The Hills Have Eyes. I like Last House on the Left. There are a few others later on that I really enjoy. But there's also a lot of them later on that I really don't enjoy. Have mixed feelings about some of them, and then there's also just a lot of them that are just don't hit for me. So this one, I just recently rewatched the behind the scenes, the Never Sleep Again documentary. At least on the first few. I didn't make it through the whole 4 hours, but I did watch the first few. And it's kind of an interesting thing. This was a New Line Cinema movie. New Line before this had only done a couple of very low budget movies. They really hadn't produced much. They were mostly a distributor. They really hadn't done a whole lot as far as making movies. And Wes Craven came around with this script idea, and they took a chance on him. They financed the movie for, I think the budget at the time was a little under $2 million, which is a very low budget movie even for its day. It doesn't look it. That's one thing that I can say about this one. This movie does not look like it has as low a budget as it has. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about it is most of the effects still hold up. There are a couple that are that were, one or two were misses in the original, the first time I saw it way back when, but there are a couple of them that do not hold up now, but um, so New Line took a chance on him when everybody else had turned him down. He had originally wanted to partner with Cunningham, who had done Friday the 13th, and they didn't think that it would be scary enough. They thought that somebody in your dreams wouldn't frighten you. Good evening, Miss Jen. Jen says she can't stay too long in the comments tonight. That's all right, Jen. We love you anyway, and we're glad you made it in at least for whatever time you can stick around for, sweetie. So lost my train of thought. So he went to Cunningham. Cunningham said that it wouldn't be scary. It was somebody in your dreams. You just wake up. The fact that Craven based it on a couple of real news stories that were Asian immigrant young kid said that there was a monster in his dream that was going to kill him if he went to sleep. His father was a doctor and gave him sleeping pills. It went on for like 5 days or something like that. That the kid didn't sleep. He finally did fall asleep, and when he did, they found out that he had a coffee maker hidden in his closet, and that he had been spitting out, or that the pills hadn't stayed down. Depending on what era you see an interview with Wes Craven. But and then when he finally did go to sleep, he did die in his sleep, screaming and yelling that something was after him, and the kid ended up dying in his sleep. And that's what Wes Craven based this idea on. There was a couple of different things that Craven's did over the years that were based at least loosely on real life events, or at least inspired by them. So the movie kind of starts off with a young blonde girl who would, in most other movies, would probably be your final girl. Very much has that classic 80s final girl look to her. Her name is Tina, and starts off with a dream sequence. Now, one of the elements in this first dream sequence is one that it didn't work for me at the time. I know it did for a lot of people, but it surely doesn't hold up. And that's the extended marionette arms. Didn't work for me then, and it's laughable if I watch it now. And I'm actually sitting and really watching it. It literally does crack me up. So you start the movie for the title sequence. You get Freddy in the basement building the glove, which is something that a lot of people forget about. And I did for a while. It was one of those things that nobody really talked about way back when, and it didn't start until, I guess, again, the early internet days, when people were talking about, there was people talking about how creepy that scene was and how that built tension to start with. One of the clips with Robert Englund talks about when he first put the glove on and realized how him being a small person, fairly light built, not really necessarily tall, but not overly short. I think he's like 5'7", 5'8", something in that neighborhood. Just a hair short for a guy. But he realized that how heavy it was and how it made him kind of drop his shoulder. And when he realized that, he first corrected it and walked kind of straight with it. You'll notice that in some of the sequences, he's standing up very straight and very rigid. But as the franchise went on, especially, but also in several of the scenes you can tell were later filmed filmed later when they were making this one, His arms kind of, when he's not got the glove up and talking with it, or menacing with it, it hangs really low, and that shoulder drops. And he said that what he did was, when he embraced that and the weight of it, he looked at he thought about old movies from the 50s and 60s, and the way that the gunfighters carried themselves. The both physical and mental weight of that, of the gun, and the lives that it would take and had taken, hanging on these gunfighters' sides, and he put that kind of psychologically into the character. Um, Interestingly enough, as iconic as Robert Englund is as Freddy, he actually wasn't the first choice. In fact, he actually wasn't even the second choice. Um, they was originally cast an older gentleman, and I don't remember his name. They don't really talk about him very much, but but it didn't really work out with the makeup tests, for the old man version of Freddy. So they switched over, to David Warner, who has been in so many things. Great character actor. My personal favorite role with him, and I know a lot of people, it's going to be, um, time after time, but for me, I love him as the villain in Waxworks. He is so camp and so fun in Waxworks, that's my favorite role with him. Um, but unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, things that they thought were going to be able to be, things that he was going to be able to take care of, didn't get taken care of, and the project that he was working on ran along. So they ended up looking for another person, and they called in Robert Englund. Robert was fresh off of the V miniseries, which is a miniseries that I loved. I loved that when I was a kid, and I still like. Actually, I like both of them. Haven't been back to revisit the series in many, many years, so I can't really say too much about that. But I loved both of the miniseries, um, especially the second one. Michael Ironside was really good in that one. Um, but so they took Robert Englund, um, and Robert Englund brought a dark sense of humor, to the role. Um, there were one-liners to an extent. The script, as far as that goes, was pretty much about the same. But Robert brought kind of a glee to it. And they decided to go with that portrayal of it. Robert Englund's Freddy relished the torturing the kids, and including verbally torturing the kids. Um, so you have Tina wakes up from the dream, and then you meet our Scooby Gang of characters. You have Tina, who is the quintessential final girl look. You have Nancy, who's the kind of, um, somewhat reminiscent of Laurie Strode. She's kind of bookish, um, but not by any means downplayed. Um, she's just kind of your average girl next door. Then you meet Glenn, played by Johnny Depp, in his first acting role. And you get the one of two characters that I'm not really crazy about, the way that they're portrayed. I don't think that the Rod character, I don't think the actor that played him did a very good job. I don't like the way that character is written. I think it's very much it was okay in its day, but it just doesn't hold up now. It feels very much like a bad John Travolta impression at times. especially Welcome Back Kotter era John Travolta. Um, and it just doesn't really hold up to me at all. Like I said, never been super fond of it, but it sure didn't age well. Um, so Tina tells everybody that she had a bad dream and wants everybody to come over and stay with her in case it happens again. You get some lighter moments and some interactions. Rod kind of scares everybody by using a garden trowel, or it's not the trowel, but it's the little claw thing that you break up dirt with. Drags it across something and scares them all. Very reminiscent of all of their dreams. Um, so you get to our first kill. After all the little interpersonal stuff. And they used a room that or they used a version of a room like they had used in Fred Astaire movie, where Fred Astaire had been dancing up the walls and on the ceiling and all. Um, and Another New Line movie from the same year also used it, which was Breaking Two. Um, but they used it in this one to do a very awesome practical effect of Tina being drug up the wall and killed on the ceiling. Um, and her body drops from the ceiling all slashed up onto the bed, and the MP2A made them cut out um, anything after that. So there's a kind of a weird cut in there. And unfortunately, the footage apparently has been lost. But actually, there was a pool of blood, and when she drops onto it, it splatters. You actually see it hit Rod in the face. Um, but unfortunately, like I said, that was according to Bob Shea in that Never Sleep Again interview. That was lost footage. Um, so that'll never see the light of day. Unfortunately, it was probably thrown in the trash or whatever. Um, but And of course, Rod's blamed for it because he was in a locked room with her. Logically speaking, you can understand that. We saw what was going on. We know what the deal is, but in reality, would anybody believe that it was a dream killer? So, um, they you in this case, and we get to meet Heather Langenkamp, who plays Nancy. We get to meet her dad, played by the great John Saxon. Um, John Saxon has such a career in both high end movies as well as B movies. Um, one of those just knows everybody and been and acted with everybody and been in everything kind of actors. Um, and embraced the B movie and lower budget movie life when it got towards the latter part of his career, and was a character actor who just kept acting. Um, we have a lot of great movies with him in it, and there's not a whole lot you can say about him. Um, you also get to meet Tina's mother, or Nancy's mother. We actually met Tina's mother in the very beginning. But Tina's mother is played by Ronnie Blakely. This is a performance that I know she won some awards and had worked and had a pretty solid career as a musician as well. But that was a performance that I won't say that I didn't like her in way back when I saw her. But over the years, I just really don't care for her performance at all. I don't think she does a good job with it. Um, so um, yeah, lost my train of thought again. Um, so you get to meet them. You find out that they're estranged. Go. She takes Nancy back home. Um, Find out that she's an alcoholic. Um, and Nancy goes to school the next day, and then you get some of, to me, what is the creepiest moments in the film. Um, Nancy, of course, didn't sleep, so she dozes off in class. And you get the uh infamous Shakespeare reading that goes from being at a normal level to this quiet whisper that's kind of drawn out, kind of slow. Um, Really, kind of, it does let you know. It does kind of tell you that she's dreaming, but it does it in a way that doesn't really break the tension. So it's not, or it actually kind of ramps up the tension in a certain way. Um, but Nancy looks out into the hallway and sees Tina in a body bag, um, and then is drug off, um, and of course gets up to go and investigate as you do in horror movies. Um, Bumps into the hall monitor, which is a great jump scare. And not only is it a great jump scare in and of itself, again, it doesn't take you out of the suspense. Of course, the um, famous line, where's your hall pass? Screw your hall pass. And then Freddy's voice coming out of the hall monitor, no running in the halls. And Nancy follows the trail from the body bag down into the boiler room of the school. Um, and again, this is some really nice tension, some really well built suspense. And you really do think that Freddy's about to get her, and she burns her arm on one of the pipes and wakes herself up. Um, I can't remember if Rod happens before. I think it does. I think she's dreaming that later on, and Rod sees Rod in the jail cell. Um, and they, um, uh, Freddy in the dream hangs Rod. Um, I like this sequence. In retrospect, you can kind of see the fact that the bed sheet wrapping around his neck is filmed in reverse. There, it's kind of twitchy and not real smooth in doing so, but it works for what it is. It's a little bit weird, but and the setup for it's a little bit weird. But So Nancy sees that, wakes up, goes to the police station, gets the guard to go in and look, and by that time, of course, Rod's hung himself, quote unquote, or Freddy's actually hung him, but and so now Rod's dead, and Nancy's mother takes her to a dream clinic. Well, it takes her to a sleep clinic, to study her dreams and all of that. Um, you get there's kind of an interesting little cameo. Well, not really a cameo, kind of a before they were famous, little bit. The doctor who is running the sleep clinic is played by Charles Fleischer. Um, Charles Fleischer would go on to be the voice of Roger Rabbit, um, which is kind of a weird thing, but at the time he was a stand-up comedian, um, and didn't really do a lot of acting. He was mostly um, just kind of a weird one-off, and kind of a weird thing that you know weird tie in there. Um, so in the dream clinic, she's attacked. Her dream goes off the scale for for what a dream would normally be, or for what a nightmare would normally be um, on their meter, um, and manages to pull a hat out of her dream. Um, Pulls a hat trick. No, she pulls a hat out of her dream with her, and inside the hat there's a label that says Fred Krueger on it. She shows her mother, and of course she doesn't believe her. She thinks that she had it on her the whole time. Um, but the reason that she doesn't believe her is because of the fact that she takes her home and gives her a good heaping helping of exposition. It turns out that Fred Krueger was someone that all the parents in the neighborhood got together and killed because when he was alive, he was a child killer, molester. Um, and um, they screwed up when they arrested him. And all the evidence was inadmissible. He got off scot free. So all the parents got together in a neighborhood vigilante party and went and killed him themselves. They burned him alive in his boiler room. And for some god awful reason, Nancy's mother kept the glove. Souvenir. I don't know. It's one of those movie things that, and it never really comes back. It could have been an interesting thing if Nancy had worn that one against Freddie with his, but we get some scenes with her and Glenn. You find out that Nancy is kind of, as I said earlier, not only kind of bookish, but is very bookish. She goes and she gets a book from her library that is improvised weapons and booby traps. Wes Craven was actually in the military, and that was one of those books that was required reading. And so he used it in this. Not all of the traps that are in it are, of course, that are in the movie, actually came from it. In fact, only just the light bulb, with the shotgun shell is the only thing that actually came from it. The hammer and the trip wires and all of that, were actually just, the special effects department came up with those ideas. The kind of a goof on it is she's talking to Glenn about this, and she's standing on a bridge. And if you actually look up into the skyline behind them, even though they're supposed to be in Springfield, Illinois, there actually is a Springwood. I said spring. Yeah. Anyway, they're supposed to be in Illinois, and there's actually palm trees in the background. A lot of people point that out. I personally didn't notice it. Back in the day, I didn't. I don't think I ever actually would have noticed it if I hadn't read it somewhere. But because I'm not one of those people who really watches for that sort of thing. I'm not looking for. I don't look for continuity issues. So when I find them, it really does take me out of things. And like I said, that's not one that I found. But now it's in your head. If you hadn't noticed it before, the next time you watch it, you'll notice it. But when Nancy gets home, she finds out that her mother has torn down the rose trellis that Glenn was using to climb up the side of the house to get into her room, and has put bars on the outsides of all the windows, and the front door. The deadbolt was changed to an inside key instead of a thumb bolt. So Nancy mother goes to bed, she's drunk as usual and probably drunker than usual. Um, and Nancy um, hatches a plan to have Glenn um, come and wake her up, and she's gonna bring Freddie out of the dream the way she brought the hat out of the dream. Um, and she calls Glenn, um, and makes a whole big deal about just come out here, bring your bat, and when I bring him out of the dream, help me with it. But unfortunately, Glenn falls asleep. Famous line: "Don't fall asleep." Well, Glenn fell asleep. Um, Kind of a fun gag on it. Again, they used the rotating room. Glenn gets pulled down into the bed, and they flip the room upside down and dumped uh, like 20 gallons or something like that of watered down blood through the hole in the mattress with the room upside down. One of the behind the scenes things on that one is that as soon as the blood hit the light fixture, that the center of the room light fixture, it shorted out and actually zapped the crap out of the guy who was pouring the liquid in. Um, uh, and of course, then he just dumps it in even harder. It actually, the water, the weight of it, of the blood, ended up kind of going to one side of it, sloshing to one side of it when he did that. And it wasn't like on a motor or anything. It was actually a big wheel on the side of it that they had turned by hand, and it actually got away from the guy, the special effects team that was supposed to be holding it upside down. So the room ends up spinning, um, and spun pretty quick. And if you watch that scene, you can see where the blood just kind of flows up the wall, and there's these long tendrils of it. That's because the room is rotating. Um, and then because the room went all the way around instead of just going 180 degrees, it pulled out a bunch of wires and ended up leaving because the scene had to be shot upside down so that it looked like the blood was coming out of the bed and up to the ceiling. So it goes all the way around and ends up like that. And Wes Craven was was doing the cinematography for that scene himself. So he ends up strapped upside down into the camera chair, um, and with no electricity in there and no way to turn it back on for like 20 minutes because the way that it blew everything out. Um, and the window in the side of the bedroom, when it flipped around, all the blood went out of that. So the four guys that were on the sides turning the wheel ended up just completely drenched from head to toe, in fake blood. So, um, I know it's a very commonly known behind the scenes thing, but I always found it somewhat amusing. And it was, like I said, I watched The Never Sleep Again, and that was one of the things that they all laughed about, had a good time with. Another thing that I found really interesting is that as far as the cast went, um, Wes Craven ran an open set. So even when Tina's filming was done for the Tina character, the actress came back to the set several times, um, hung out with Nancy, hung out with some of the crew members, even helped with some of the standing in and when they were doing the lighting setups and whatever else things that they could do. She came back quite a bit, and the guy who played Rod also did. Not quite as much. He had some substance issues at the time, so and he fully admits that. And Thankfully, he's clean and sober now. So, but he did come back a couple of times, they said, and I thought that was kind of interesting that they had enough camaraderie on the set and had enough friendship between the cast that they would come back and help out some on their own time of their own choice. It's always nice when you can make friends like that. So kills off Glenn. You get the bit with the phone, um, which is another one of those things that Heather Langenkamp really wanted that prop. One of those old princess phones or dolly phones, depending on where you live and or where you're from, what you would call that. But the bottom half of it was replaced with a mouth and tongue so that it could be Freddy. Um, and she tried really hard to get that prop, and they tried hard to get it for her, but it never quite got there and got lost somewhere along the way. So, um, but she sets up the traps and goes to sleep with an alarm set so that she can pull Freddy out. Um, and she does. She goes into the dream and she quote unquote pulls Freddy out into the real world. Um, and then this movie kind of goes really good and really bad at the same time. It's really cool. I like the way that it's done. I like the pacing of it. But the traps seem a little cartoonish. Freddy jumps out from behind the bed in a jump scare that does not work at all. Um, Watching Robert try to run with that heavy ass glove on, and again him being a smaller person, is pretty comical, and it didn't take me out of it the first few times that I saw it way back in the day, but once you see it, it really does kind of take you out of it, or it does me anyway. Um, of course, he falls for the traps. He gets shot with the um exploding light bulb. He gets hit in the gut with the sledgehammer, um, the tripwire, all of that. And like I said, the pacing on it's good, but it's not great. And then we get to um the stairwell. Nancy's going up the steps um to go upstairs and is stepping through the step into some goo. This is one of those things that really creeped me out as a kid, and because of what it was. And now looking at it, it kind of creeps me out because of the texture of it. Bisquick and oatmeal apparently left to sit out and get good and thick and sticky. And it's a texture thing. It really kind of makes my teeth itch. Um, I don't really care for that one, but for a whole different reason. Um, you get upstairs, and John Saxon finally breaks down the door and comes in to rescue her. She's been screaming out the window. Um, uh, and you get up there just in time to see um, Freddy kind of drag mom, um, Nancy's mother's character, into a light up bed. This sequence is really. Uh, this is the reason that this one is my second favorite in this franchise, behind 3, because I really get lost here. The effects do not stand up. Um, it looks like neon tubes underneath the sheet. And pulling it down, it just. I understand the emotional impact, and I can see the emotional impact, and Heather Langenkamp plays that very well. Um, Yeah, it's just one of those things that's not great for me. And John Saxon's character leaves, and Nancy's starting to leave, and Freddy comes back up through the bed, and you see kind of his outline through the sheet, and he kind of cuts it and comes out through it, and then you get Sparkle Freddy. Nancy figures out that she takes Glenn's advice from what he said, and she turns her back on him and takes away his power. And she decides that she's not only not afraid of him, but she's not afraid of anything anymore. And taking away that fear defeats him. Unfortunately, it's a great idea. I love the concept of it, and I just the lack of budget, um the lack of credible effect at the time, for what they wanted, it just doesn't work. You get all he gets all sparkly and just kind of dissipates into nothingness, and it's just super cheese. Um, it 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 looks like a Roger Corman level effect. And it just doesn't work. It didn't work for me then. I laughed at it when the first time I saw it. I just no Sparkle Freddy just kind of loses me. Um, so after Sparkle Freddy, she walks out the door, and it's the next day. Uh, Sun's all bright and shiny. Her friends drive up in Glenn's Cadillac, and um, she tells her mom bye. Her mom says she's going to quit drinking. Um, she runs down the down the sidewalk, jumps into the Cadillac convertible, and the roof comes up, and the roof has Freddy's striped shirt design. The red and green of Freddy's sweater is now what the top of the car looks like. It locks them in and drives off with them. And you get another effect that does not hold up well, and that's Nancy's mother being pulled through the little window in the door. Ugh. Looks like one of those blow up dolls being sucked through. It's bad. So bad. But then you get a pan over to the little girl's doing the jumping rope, and it plays the Freddy nursery rhyme. And again, I know this is a well known thing, but the choice of the Christmas sweater was because Wes Craven had read an article about was reading an article about color blindness, and how even non-colorblind people have um, issues separating red and green when they're side by side. Um, and to people who, and some people who are overly sensitive to it, not necessarily colorblind on the red green spectrum or anything, but some people are really sensitive to those two together, and it can actually be painful for them. I don't know if that includes like watching his sweater on TV or whatever, but I know if they were looking at that in real life, that would be painful. Um, very uncomfortable at the very least for people who are sensitive to that. So, um, the guy that did the practical effects for it said that he had looked at a whole bunch of actual real burn victims, and it had done makeup and done some of the makeup tests in that style, but it didn't pick up well on the camera, and was trying to figure out exactly what he could do to take that and modify it where it would. And he was out to dinner with family, and they were um, they were eating pizza, and his 6-year-old had a pepperoni pizza and was dragging the pepperoni around on through the cheese on it and making um, kind of making shapes in it, kind of making pulls in the cheese, and that was actually kind of what inspired him to take the burn makeup and to do a little bit of applying cheese to it. Effectively, as far as the look goes, that's where they came up with the design for Freddy, so that it wasn't a true burn victim look, but it was based thereon, and you could believe that it was. Um, and of course, the ending that they gave you was not the ending that Wes Craven wanted. He didn't think that it was. Um, he honestly thought that this was a one and done, and that there would never be a sequel and never be a need for a sequel. Um, Bob Shea, on the other hand, said, it's a horror movie. It's the '80s. We've got to have at least somewhat of a way to follow it up, just in case that it blows up like all the like the Friday the 13th movies and other things at the time were doing. So they kind of had a bit of an argument about it, and um, they ended up shooting some stuff, and they ended up shooting like 5 different variants of the ending of it, which in the editing room, everything except for Freddy driving the car and everybody else being passengers is what actually was conglomerated into the ending that we got. So after they had finished the movie, they had it edited, they had the music score added to it, which if you listen to the last episode of on Friday the 13th with my good friends Jen and Christian, we talked about the score, um, and how Friday built its score um, very similarly to Halloween, and this one kind of took the same thing, but took it back down and minimalized it just a little bit more, and uses disharmonic notes to add unease to it. So you have a minor scale and minor notes, and then you have one that's a major in a place where your mind wouldn't necessarily expect that to be, um, causing disharmonic notes. Um, and it's an unsettling score. It's really if you like that sort of thing, it's really quite nice, and it's piano music, and um, it's very boiled down to using basic music theory. Um, so they had the movie in the can, they had everything ready, and they took it around again to all of the major studios, and none of them would, none of them wanted anything to do with it. It was too low budget. It was the concept was too far away from what things that had been a success already. This was something it didn't fit the mold of those sort of things. So um, New Line decided to, or Bob Shea and his sister Lynn, who played the teacher in it, in in this movie, um, were the people who owned New Line. And they actually mortgaged the company for another $1 million, I think it was, and distributed it themselves. Managed to get it into um, pretty solid number of theaters for the in the beginning, and then um, with minimal money left for advertising after that, it just blew up by word of mouth, and it became a franchise, and it spawned a cultural icon in Freddy. Um, Not something most were expecting, including them. So it was Wes Craven's first mainstream hit, um, which kind of um, because what he had done before was in the horror thriller vein. This was a horror thriller. It blew up and it made him a household name for the most part. And it kind of plagued him his entire career. He never really wanted to make. He loved good horror movies. He loved good psychological movies, but it wasn't the only kind of movie he wanted to make. It kind of typecast him. He didn't quite lean into it quite as much as Robert Englund did. Robert Englund fell in love with the idea with the fame that this gave him in this genre, and ran with it. He did a few other things. He has done a few other things over the years that were not horror or thrillers. But anytime you go see a medium to low budget horror movie, you're never surprised if there's a cameo by Robert Englund in it. Sometimes it's only a few seconds, and sometimes it's half the movie. You never know. So, like I said, this one kind of fluctuates between 3 and 4 for me on it. If I had to rank it right this minute, I would say it was, as of right now, I would put it in place 3. I would still have TCM as my favorite, Friday as number 2, Nightmare is number 3, and Halloween is number 4. And again, that might change tomorrow. You never know. Just depends on what kind of mood I'm in with these. But that's going to be kind of our show for tonight. That's kind of my thoughts on this one, where I rank it. In its own franchise, this is the only one that I don't put the original first. I do prefer Dream Warriors to this one in this franchise. But this one is second. So, if you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment and go and give us a rating. Give us a written review on any of the ones that'll let you do it. Amazon will. We're on there. Spotify now, so iHeartRadio. You can get the podcast there. Listen to it at your leisure. If you're on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. If you haven't already. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know what things about this movie you love, what things about this movie you think are dated and don't hold up. Let me know where this one falls in your ranking of the big 4. And above all, as always, also we have an email address. For those of you on YouTube, it's rolling across the bottom of the screen now. For those of you that are on listening to this as a podcast, feel free to drop me a line. Let me know what you think. Let me know what we can do better. I've tweaked the audio this week, so I'm hoping that there's no fan noise in the background. But the email address for the show is face4horror@yahoo.com. So I'm going to end it here, folks. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and or listen. And as always, y'all be good, y'all be safe, and y'all have a good one.